Tomas had been the baker of the little town for the better part of 20 years, and in all that time he had risen while the rest of the world still slept, and lit his great oven in the dark, and worked the dough in the warm and flowery quiet of the small hours. He liked those hours. He liked the way the town belonged, for a little while, only to him and to the bread. And he had one small ritual that he kept above all the others. The first loaf out of the oven each morning, the best and the roundest, he would set upon the sill of the front window to cool, where the first light of the day would find it golden and steaming, like a small sun set out to greet the larger one. He was a widower these 6 years, and the mornings were the part of the day when he minded the emptiness least, for the bread kept him company, and the town, when it woke, kept him company after. He had no children of his own. Sometimes he thought the loaves were a little like children to him, each one shaped by his hands and sent out warm into the world to do it some small good. It was a foolish notion, perhaps, for a grown man to hold about bread, but it was his, and it kept him going, and he had long ago stopped being ashamed of the small tendernesses that get a person through a life. It was there, on that sill, that the mystery began. For one gray morning, Tomas turned from his oven to find the first loaf gone. He was not, at first, much troubled by it. A hungry passerby, he thought, or a stray dog with a long reach, or his own forgetful hands setting it somewhere else. But then he saw what had been left in the loaf's place. A single coin, a small and worn one, of no great value, set neatly in the very center of the sill. And beside it, folded once a little scrap of paper. Tomas unfolded it with floury fingers. On it, in a careful, wobbling hand, the hand of someone still learning their letters, was written a single word. The word was thank. He stood a while with the scrap in his hand, puzzled, and though he could not quite have said why, oddly moved. Then he put the coin in his apron pocket and the note upon the shelf behind the counter, and he baked another loaf, and the day went on. The next morning it happened again. The first loaf gone from the sill, a single worn coin left in its place, and a scrap of paper, folded once, bearing one word in the same careful, wobbling hand. This time the word was you. Tomas set it on the shelf beside the first. Thank you. And the morning after that, another. 4. And then bread. Each dawn a loaf was taken, and a coin was left, more than the loaf was worth, if anything. And a single word was added to the row of scraps upon his shelf, building, one small word at a time, toward something he could not yet read the whole of. He took to studying the little words in the evenings, when the shop was shut and the ovens were cooling, turning them this way and that as though they were the pieces of a puzzle, which of course they were. Thank you for them. He could make a dozen endings of it, and did, lying awake in the dark. Thank you for the bread. Thank you for the kindness. But he did not truly know, and he found, to his own surprise, that he did not wish to hurry it, for the not knowing had a sweetness of its own, like the last few pages of a good book that a person is in no particular rush to finish. He found that he began to look forward to it. He would set out the first loaf with particular care now, and choose the roundest, and he would leave the window unlatched on purpose, though he had always latched it before. Whoever his quiet visitor was, he did not wish to shut them out. He mentioned it, after a week or so, to old Mrs. Finn, who came each morning for her small brown loaf and knew everything that happened in the town, and a good deal that had not happened yet. She listened, and she looked at the little row of word scraps on the shelf, and she read them softly under her breath, and then she gave Tomas a long and thoughtful look. You do not remember, do you, she said. 2 winters back, the Hallow family, down past the mill. The father took ill and could not work all that long cold season, and there were the 4 little ones to feed. She nodded at his oven, and a loaf appeared on their step, near every morning all that winter, left quiet before light. No name to it, no fuss, until the spring came, and the father was well, and back on his feet, and it stopped. She folded her hands upon the counter. They never did find out who to thank. The mother asked all up and down the town that spring, wanting to know whose door to go and knock upon. But whoever it had been was careful. I wanted no thanks at all, it seemed. She looked at him, mild as milk. A strange sort of person to do a thing like that and want nothing back for it. but there are such people now and again. Thank goodness for them, is what I say. And she took up her small brown loaf and paid her coin and went out into the morning. Tomas said nothing and busied himself with the wrapping of the next loaf and did not quite meet her eye. For he did remember, of course. He had simply never thought it a thing worth remembering. The next morning, Tomas did not go straight to his oven. He set the first loaf upon the sill as always, and then he drew back into the shadows at the rear of the shop, and he waited very still in the warm dark to see who would come. It felt strange to lie in wait in his own shop, like a boy playing at some game, and stranger still to feel his heart go quick as the window paled, as though he were the one about to be caught at something. Perhaps, in a way, he was. A man may hide a kindness so well and so long that he half forgets he ever did it. And it can be a tender and an awkward thing to have it found out at last, even by a child, even years and years after. For a long while there was nothing but the tick of the cooling oven and the slow graying of the window. And then, so soft he almost missed it, there came the smallest of sounds. A shape appeared at the window, low down, no higher than the sill itself. A small hand reached up, and there, rising on tiptoe to peer over the ledge, was a child. A little girl, perhaps 7 years old, in a coat too big for her, with her tongue between her teeth in concentration as she set down her coin, just so in the center of the sill, and laid her folded scrap of paper beside it, and reached up with both arms to gather the warm loaf against her chest. Tomas came forward slowly so as not to frighten her, and said good morning very gently, as though it were the most ordinary thing in the world to find a small girl at his window before the sun. She went quite still, caught, her eyes enormous. But she did not run. She held the loaf, and she lifted her chin, and with a great and trembling dignity, she told him that she was not stealing, that she always left a coin, that she was paying, fair and square, a little more each day as she saved it up, because her mother had told her that you must always pay for what you take. And that anyway, she said, her voice dropping, it was not really for herself. It was to pay back the bread that had come to their step. Every morning, the winter her father was sick. Her mother had never known who left it. But the little girl had once risen early, that long ago winter, and seen the baker's shape going quietly away in the dark. And she had never, ever forgotten. Tomas found that he could not speak for a moment. Then he knelt down, so that his eyes were level with hers, and he asked, very softly, if he might show her something. He led her to the shelf behind the counter, where the little scraps of paper stood in their careful row, all the single words she had left him, morning after morning, saved everyone. And he laid them out in order along the counter, and together they read the whole of what she had been telling him, one word at a time, across all those dawns. Thank you for the bread you left us when we had none. The little girl looked at her own words all laid out in a line, and then she looked up at the baker, and her lip trembled, and Tomas gathered up all the little worn coins she had left him and pressed them gently back in her two small hands. You have paid me, he said, a great deal more than any loaf is worth. Keep your coins, and come to the window whenever you like. The first loaf shall be yours from now on. Only you must promise me one thing. What? She whispered. That some winter a long time from now, when you are grown and someone near you is cold and hungry, you will leave a loaf on a step in the dark and tell no one. That is how it is paid back. Not to me. Onward. It only ever goes onward. The little girl considered this very seriously, in the way that children consider the great promises of their lives. And then she nodded once and said that she would. And Tomas believed her. There was something in her small, solemn face that made a person believe her. And so it was that the baker's quiet visitor became a quiet visitor no longer. The little girl came each morning, openly now, and Tomas would have the first loaf ready and warm for her at the window. And sometimes, when there was time, he let her stand upon a stool beside him and sink her small hands into the dough, and taught her the old slow secrets of the bread. The row of word scraps he did not throw away. He kept them folded in a tin upon the shelf, and now and then on a quiet morning he would take them out and read them over and smile. For it seemed to him a fine thing, and a rare one, to be thanked so carefully and for so long for a kindness he had thought too small to be worth the doing. Nothing kind, he decided, is ever really too small. It goes out into the dark like a loaf left on a step, and it comes back, in its own good time, one careful word at a time, warm as bread and twice as welcome. Wherever you happen to be tonight, and whatever quiet task is keeping your hands busy, thank you for spending this little while here with us. Rest easy, and whenever you are ready, there will always be another story waiting.